Welcome to Extra Takes, hosted by Northland Church Senior Pastor Dr. Joshua Laxton. Join us each week as Pastor Josh reveals the rest of the story behind his sermons. We'll discuss how those who follow Christ can live out a biblical vision for the church in our world today.
Well, hello, Northland family and friends. Welcome to another episode of Extra Takes. I am your co-host, PJ, along with my sidekick, partner in crime, Matt Shiles. And hey, Matt.
How you doing?
Well, I'm doing. It's Monday. A lot on my plate already, and so hey, we're squeezing in extra takes, which people would be gracious and like you don't have to squeeze in, but we love it, and it's another opportunity to talk just a little bit more about the weekend.
We do, and people plan their schedules around it, and if we don't do it, they ask us about it. But welcome to my office. I'm not sure if I've ever done it in my office, but yeah, let's dive in. This weekend was a heavy one. There was a lot of content, and it was a heavy one for you. So I saw the 11 o'clock service, and your dad was in the 11.
Yeah.
Was it that heavy in all three?
Yeah.
Like the way you ended it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an emotional. I mean, preaching a whole weekend, regardless on just a regular weekend is emotional and takes it out of you. But yeah, there was a lot going on.
Yeah, I didn't even think I would do it, to be honest. I mean, the behind the scenes story of it is on Saturday, I was kind of wrapping up the message. Sounds really, really bad. I looked up and I'm like, wow, I have finished quickly. And I had like 8 minutes left on the timer, and it just struck me all to tell people why this message is so meaningful to me.
Wow.
Because I've been dwelling on it, and I've talked to a couple people about it and how this, series and how Jesus is the greater Bethlehem, and caring for my dad and seeing his kind of just health decline. Like I'm going to do it, and I even told the Saturday gathering, I said I probably won't share tomorrow, so you get this, and I said you're welcome. But then after I shared, people came up. It was so meaningful to them. People had messaged me, emailed me, and said it was meaningful. And I'm like, well, maybe I struck a chord, and so I probably ought to keep sharing it.
Fascinating story. You looked up and you had 8 minutes to go. Has that ever happened?
No. No, in which, people will be like, well, you really think that you have to hit the time? I just felt like, again, this is where I'm like, how much do I share? Again, it's just when you're doing a message, you're trying not, well, for me, I mean, that you're squeezing a lot of stuff in, but again, it's like the last, I didn't squeeze, when you look at the first 2 points, there really wasn't a lot in the sense of, where it was stacked, where I really needed to go in some sense slide by slide, is helping people see how she could have how her and Mary and Joseph could have courage. And so when I didn't know how long it was going to take for me to go through that, which is why I didn't really necessarily, and just so people know, I normally manuscript out my messages. Because of how in some sense, overpacked my schedule has become, I obviously have time to study, because here's my little notebook, my little notebook. Here it is. It's, all of this is just the last couple of weeks. Okay. So I map everything out, and what I usually do is I take that and I type it out, and then I send that manuscript to the tech team, and then they create the slides. Well, what I've just done is I've eliminated the manuscripting right now, and I basically create the slides. So that's part of where I don't. Sometimes it's really hard because I'm not writing everything out. And so it's not fully scripted, and when I say fully scripted, fully manuscripted the way it would normally be. And so, I looked up and I'm like, all right, I think I'm supposed to share. So.
Yeah, so I think that's the second week in a row where you had a leading of the Spirit, because last week you changed on Saturday night.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and you connected You talked about who the greater Bethlehem is, and that was Jesus, and you hadn't expected that. So yeah, fascinating that again this week, the way you ended was really poignant, really emotional, and wasn't planned. I think that's fascinating for us to hear. So let's look at the overview and the 3 points. So, you talked about this was December 6th and 7th, 2025. We're in Journey to Bethlehem, and the road to Bethlehem is called Courage, and we're in Luke 1. And you define courage as the objects of your faith. The objects of your faith is greater than the object outcome of your fears. So, really, this idea of faith over fear or fear over faith and what that looks like. And that's where that third point, you really fleshed that out. And you gave us these three truths. First truth is the invitation to journey to Bethlehem. Next is the fears faced on the journey to Bethlehem. And then third is the courage needed on the journey to Bethlehem. So if you could describe this week in one word, what would it be?
Can I say courage?
No.
So I can't say courage. So it's interesting how we play this game, and usually when I create a title for a message, it's usually because it's around that thing,
Yeah.
that word, and you won't let me do it.
So I think courage is fine for this one, because really what I'm trying to get at is if we think back to this message in 6 months or a year, what would jog our memory to say, "Ooh, I know that's that message," and this may very well be the courage message. So.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think the courage. Courage is, again, it's just a big one because the invitation is amazing, but it scares the daylights out of her. And then she's going to need courage, but everything is anchored in what, is in what the angel is saying God's going to do.
Mm.
So courage is anchored, and that's where the whole idea of faith over fear, you could kind of go with that. People have that on their shirt, and they have, and that's true. But that's where courage is not the absence of fear. It's actually the faith that you have that actually conquers the fear.
Yeah, because if the fear just wasn't there, you wouldn't need that courage.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Any other big takeaways from this weekend?
Well, the big takeaways, I'm telling you, whenever I get into it, like I love integrating what people learn or would have learned in college or whatnot, or, psychology. And because people would go, well, psychology is not in the Bible. They blah, 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 blah. You have to understand, Maslow wasn't living in AD or BC, 4 or 5, but he has, again, he has done some work in cultivating culture, given us a paradigm, a framework of how to understand our most basic needs as a human being and breaking them down. And I think it's a great framework. I think all 5 of those needs are actually true. And you can see those needs throughout Scripture. So I think a big takeaway is how to, and again, I didn't force it. Clearly it was there. But really how the virgin birth actually threatened every one of her most basic human needs. I think that was a really big takeaway, which is why I spent so much time on it on the third point.
Yeah. You have gone through those needs before, but the way you really drilled down on those, that stuck out to me. How it just fit. I was really surprised at how deep you were able to go, and how those charts were able.
Oh man, if I had a little bit more time on that one where I left it, it was, and I'm pulling it up right now. It was the one where I said, because Jesus did this, he's the greater Bethlehem, bread of anointing and power. I would have put all of the names of the guys like David, Jacob, Ruth, Micah. So again, this is where the Bible is so deep and so infinite in the sense is that, you got Bethlehem pointing, to the greater Bethlehem. But when you look at David, God in some sense ruined his personal plans, was he not? And did God ruin in some sense Naomi's personal plans? I sure did. Jacob, Jacob kept on fighting, so there's this anointing and power that Jesus is able to give us because he was actually personally ruined. And then you look at despised, ridiculed, and mocked. David, I mean, when his older brothers, I mean, obviously they didn't respect him that much. And then even when he comes to the battlefield, what are you doing here, you little runt? Get back home. And so just the better perspective that, hey, you letting this guy, I mean, he is taunting, he is ridiculing the army of the living God. Like, I mean, so the bread of perspective, betrayed, rejected. So, I could have put up all of those names where, in some sense, they feasted on the greater Bethlehem before the greater Bethlehem ever came into. When I say the world as God incarnate. So I could have went even deeper just to show that, but obviously, but the whole point was to show that Mary did that. That she has the bread now of anointing and power. That God's calling her to this. She has the anointing of perspective because this is what God says of her. She has the bread of acceptance because God has accepted her just as she is. She has the bread of a future and a hope because this is what God has promised. This is what I will do. And then she really does have the bread of provision and redemption that her son, just as Mark Lowry, Marsh he's a very humble guy because he's not going to say that he knows and sings with Mark Lowry, who wrote Mary Did You Know? I mean, because Mark Lowry sang with the Gaithers. And so obviously they're good friends, but as Mark Lowry would point out, I mean, did you know that the son that you deliver will soon deliver you? Okay, so here's it's the bread of provision and redemption. I mean, like that. I'm telling you, that is a huge. I mean, I didn't go into this message going, I can't wait to preach this because I know exactly. I mean, no, I'm sitting there. This is why sermon prep is a work of the Spirit of God in the moment for the people.
Yeah, and for yourself.
Yeah, well, definitely for myself. Yeah. Which is why I got really passionate about these things because all of these things are true to me. I wouldn't have wrote this. I mean, like, no, I don't want to see my dad suffer. I don't want to have, not to say that there's joy in caring for him, but you think I wrote this? You think I wrote this script? No. Didn't write this script. And then just the bread of perspective of going, okay, there's no ridicule or mocking, but self-esteem. Like, when you are weary, you have a tendency mentally and emotionally to have that weariness affect you, but it's the bread of perspective that hey, God's here. He's breathing into me. And so sometimes I'm short, right now because I'm wearing a lot. And so, but God accepts me. Like I don't have to worry about him. I don't have to worry about him rejecting me because I'm short. Sometimes again, not that I'm intending to do that. It's just when you're wearing a lot of stress. So I'm telling you, I'm eating from the bread. That's the thing. I'm eating from the bread.
Well, in that slide you're talking about the bread of all of those. I think that's a great example. If you missed last week, it's not too late. Like go back and watch it because that's an example of how as we are journeying together from week to week to week, and we even talked about this, what you're building on for Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve will both build on everything that you've preached through, but also has to stand alone. That's what that slide felt like. It could stand alone, but if you were here last week, if you heard that message, you understand those, like, I was just sitting there. I was like, man, this is masterful. And there's so much more depth than you were even giving credit for because you just didn't have the time to do it or go into it. But I mean, even having each of those names, it just adds a little more clarity to just really challenging and unbelievable in a good way truths. Right? Truths that are hard to imagine, they're real.
Yeah, well, and if you go back to, and again, you could have went to so what we see like last week with Jacob, Ruth, David, and then the prophecy of Micah, all of those in terms of in terms of when they were written, what the actual person was going through. There is, when I say key themes, which is why you're able to build out, bread of a perspective, comfort, peace, and all that. But if you actually look at the entirety of their lives, it is like Mary, and it's like us. At some point, we're going to have every one of our needs threatened in some way. And who is our faith in, and what is the object of our faith? What is it, or he, or whoever? What is he moving towards an outcome, right? So again, you could look at all five of those, and you could actually look at David. At some point, he's going to face all of those threats. As well, Micah was looking, in terms of Israel as a nation, they were facing all of those threats. And then and that's where that slide where I talked about, and I had the question marks up, is that you have Mary and Joseph's fears on the left. You have in the middle the object of your faith and the outcome that the object is moving you towards, and then your human need. And you have to determine, at some point, your need here in this category is going to be threatened. What is your faith in? What is your faith in? And just that, when you look at Mary, all of them are attacked at one point because of the virgin birth.
Yeah.
And so this is where you might go through a season of life where you are attacked holistically around the needs that you have as a human being. And then what's your faith in? And because that's where you get to the crisis moment. Mary was in a crisis, and how she overcame crisis was through her faith.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was a point in the first truth about the invitation when you said, when God's invitation comes to us, it's not a flippant decision. You ought to think deeply, deliberately, logically about it, because this is some deep stuff. And I think you did a good job of creating, and I think even in that second point, creating the reality that when we look back on Mary now, we're like, oh, this is amazing. It wasn't amazing to her immediately, right? I think it's easy for us to miss the humanity and the weight of that situation. So I just appreciated you talking about that, and you sharing about God's an invitation, although it is the best thing that could ever happen to us. It doesn't come without cost.
No, that's the simple answer, right?
Yeah.
Is it does not come without a cost. And that's where if you come to Jesus and you don't think that there's a cost, that everything is just hunky dory and peachy, I don't know if you received the right invitation. I really don't. I know that's a really strong statement to make, but
Yes.
Listen, it costs you. It really does. It costs you. It costs you your life. That it's no longer about you moving where you want to move, doing what you want to do. It's all him, and he's going to ask some things of you that they're not easy. And that's like one of the things that I was even thinking about. I'm like, I wish I would have said this at the end. All right. So, you think about what I was saying about my dad, and, even getting a glimpse of Jesus's love for the Father, who endured the cross, despising its shame. Okay. So we see this joyful obedience to the cross. Okay, but it does seem like if you look at Mary and you see Mary in connection to God as his daughter, it does seem that God's asking her to bear this cross joyfully, in joyful submission, even though it is very costly. And I think a lot of times what happens is that we begrudgingly, there are people who are Christians who begrudgingly, in some sense, are spiritual or religious because this is what I got to do. And that is not actually how Jesus approached the cross. This is not how Mary and even Joseph approached this invitation. It was joyful submission, even in the midst of their own personal, to stick with the alliteration, crucifixion. It just wasn't going to be easy. It was their own cross to bear. And so, and that's where, like, so if this is what the Lord asked of me, to take care of my dad, to take care of my family, to also take care, of the church all at one time, which, hey, he's going to provide what is needed.
Yeah.
For me to for me to joyfully and submissively obey him through it, and I love watching him show up, and I love watching him, do what only he can do, knowing that there's nothing in me that could do even one of those things on my own.
Yeah. Well, and in the second point, you started laying out, the hierarchy of needs, and this is where you really started digging into it, because you laid out the needs and then the fears. So the five needs of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and then how that connects to the fears, and then you went to the cost. And I think I want to drill down on that. I think that's a really important piece. So, like, for self-actualization, you said, are you willing to let God wreck your plans? For esteem, being a Christian might hurt your rep. For love and belonging, being a Christian might cause division. And, that's with those you love most, friends and family. Safety needs, the cost is being a Christian may bring loss. That's when you talked about giving. And then physiological needs, the call to die to self. Um, Talk a little bit about kind of how, as you were just fleshing out this message, how that idea of cost for each of these kind of came out.
Well, it comes down to just Mary's, knowing Mary's story.
Mm, mm,
And this is where you need to know the background, the kind of historical background. And so when you look at what Mary's kind of going through, and then you go, well, how do you make application to us today? And then that's where practical application, and then even experience, and just knowledge plays a huge role. Is you know.
mm.
Letting God take you where he wants you to go versus you dragging God where you want to go. I mean, that is huge. Like, and I think a lot of times, again, when it comes to vocation and careers and where we're going to live and all of that, I mean, is God even a part of it? Because he sure was part of it with Mary. Sure was part of it with Mary.
Well, and I think that even gets back to the previous point about, are we following the Jesus of the Bible or a version of a religious Jesus? Um, because a version of a religious Jesus, especially in our culture today, we may be able to lead Jesus around.
Yeah, well, like I'll give you an example. So the book The Great Dechurching came out a couple years ago by a pastor here in the area. I have not had a chance to meet him yet, and Dally, he knows me because he told somebody to tell me hi. So I mean, in some sense we know of each other.
Yeah.
But in that, he talks about one of the top two reasons why people fall out of going to church, and it is because they moved. And for me, that's a classic example. Is so we move primarily for a job,
Yeah.
but then we fall out of church. I think before you take that job, you already need to be committed in your mind. We're going to go find a church, even if it's not even close to being perfect as what we have right now. Or when you're interviewing for that job, and you're visiting there, you go ahead and visit churches before you move. Because here's the thing, I can promise you, God doesn't want you to fall out of community. But yet, when it comes to our plans, hey, well, this is a good job, man. This moves me up in my career, and I can promise you, God isn't desirous of us to move up the vocational ladder only to fall off of His community. Fall out of His community. I can promise you that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's an example. I mean, that's just an example of like research right now, and so we're not even letting God want to ruin our plans.
Man, that's a good example.
So that's where you're looking at that, and then esteem. I mean, and then and I also had in the back of my mind, Jesus's like elements to. Well,
Yeah.
esteem. I mean, he's mocked, he's ridiculed, and Christians have always been. I mean, if you think about in the history of the world, in terms of leading up to where Christianity becomes the official religion of the Roman Empire, I mean, and God's people have always been marginalized. They've never necessarily fully been respected and received by the larger culture. And so even now, as the culture and the tides are changing or have changed, there's not as much respect for Christianity anymore. And I mean, and I think there's a lot of reasons why, that I get it. I mean, we can't even get along, and we're so fragmented and fractured, and we yell at each other, and we badmouth each other. I mean, heck, oh. If you listen, if Christians listen to other Christians, I mean, we don't have a good reputation, So, anyways, it's all around. And then again, love and belonging. We know the stories where people lose loved ones. I mean, definitely in the Muslim world. You come to faith in Christ. I mean, you are basically leaving your family behind. And that's huge. So you're losing your community, losing your connection, losing your support. You're talking about safety needs being threatened. Now, I really did like the tithing thing. I kept that one because that I thought that fit in perfectly. Because I mean, I think about, I mean, again, I know what I tithe. I think about, man, what if I kept that money? Now, again, I mean, from a human perspective, what if I kept that money? Oh my gosh. I mean, I could do a lot. I really could do a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way you laid it out, it's a loss. I mean, when you're looking at the world and everything we spend money on, we have a good or service to account for.
Yeah.
And then that gets to the foolishness. I mean, I think in today's society that's one of the ways, and that's one of the ways I've seen it with some of my friends who are not believers. I mean, the it's foolishness to give money, and you not get something in return. I mean, that's a really prime way to separate yourself from others.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
there's no cost to it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's look at that last point, the courage needed to on the journey to Bethlehem. And this is where, man, you geeked out. You got into all of these charts.
Did it make sense?
It did. I made them. As you were going through, I remade the chart. So I made this one, and then I made this one, and then I made this one. I think I made 3 different ones.
Yeah.
And
I try to break it down where you could logically, it was just building on one another.
well, yeah, I mean, because what happened is you had so much in those charts, but all that info was like that wasn't all new info, right?
Yeah.
It was just repeating, and you were trying to just package it in different ways. So that made all of those charts more digestible. When I understood, oh, okay, yeah, these are all the human needs, and these are all the fears that we already talked about, and okay, and then having even a cursory knowledge of Jesus' life, once you got into the Jesus would face, I mean, that just jumped off the page at me. um, and I think that really helped to tie things together. When you're getting into the application and you're considering, why would I consider doing this? Why would I? It's one thing to look at Mary's life. It's a whole nother thing to look at Jesus' life and the reality of that. Especially given the perspective and the magnitude of that. And then we already talked about it, but that final chart about the greater Bethlehem, I think that really tied it well, and just showed there's just so much depth. So if people were wanting to study this more, there's a lot there for you.
It is a lot, yeah. I mean, it really is a lot there. And that's part of, yeah, and that's where I really do like geeking out over the Bible, and obviously you could tell, you could tell, that, but that, and maybe another like even takeaway is when you look at object and outcomes. So
Mhm.
so the reason why you have a fear of an object is because you fear the outcome of that object.
Mhm.
Like that's why we played that game. All right. So I fear the object of the gator and the outcome that he might bite me. I,
That's just wisdom.
so it's just not even worth it for me to get on a paddle board.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the object of my fear is falling off a roof and breaking my arm.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Christmas lights aren't worth that.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
this is part of where, when you, and that same logic applies to our life when
Mm.
it comes to spiritual and everything
Mm.
that entails our life is that, listen, there are going to be times where all of our needs are threatened. And what are we going to put faith in? Are we going to put faith in us that, hey, listen, we're going to overcome this and we're going to be able to fight against the threats and the objects of our fears and what the outcomes possibly can be, which is where a lot of people get just tired at life, is that they're constantly fighting their fears in their own power, in their own mind, rationale, logic. And what they're
Mm.
finding is at the end of the day, they cannot do it all. And so, which is why faith plays such a huge role with spiritual faith. And then that's where and I can't wait to get to the wise men, the breadcrumbs, baby, the breadcrumbs, because then if you get to a place where you go, where you're trying to discern which faith should I put my faith in, I tell you, follow the breadcrumbs, so that's kind of where you look at it and go, oh my gosh, like sometimes because I get it so well, or I think I do. I'm like,
Yeah.
I hope people are getting it just a fraction of of how much it resonates with me in terms of like putting the pieces together. I mean, for me, it's like putting a 5,000 piece puzzle together and going, oh my gosh, this was amazing.
Well, yeah, and I think that's a good example of the puzzle. I mean, even if you've worked on just a portion of the edge, but like last week, the Greater Bethlehem, that was a bit of the edge. Now we're working on another piece of the puzzle, but you realize that piece is actually connected to that edge. You're like, oh, I know that part, right? So yeah, I mean, I think in terms of comprehension, the way you build from one week to the next just really helps, because that, even just bringing that back about the bread helps us understand that piece of it a little bit more,
Yeah.
and I'm sure there'll be things in the coming weeks that will help us understand this message more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, uh, yeah. And so, yeah, it definitely. So, well, Matt, hey, I know we were going to try to squeeze this in. So, I think we have
Good
squeezed it
conversation.
in.
Yeah.
And so it has, I mean, it was great. I can't wait for the shepherds. Oh, well, and the wise men. I mean, because I was doing the shepherds this morning,
Yeah. This
and I'm
week.
like, oh, I can't wait to, yeah, it's really, really good. So, and I'm like, and I'm telling you, this is where like God just gives you what you need when you need it. And so I'm grateful. Well, hey, Northland family and friends, thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of Extra Takes. Until this weekend and next week, blessings.
Thanks for listening to Extra Takes. Be sure to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts so you won't miss a single episode.